Hi, everybody. Nice to be back. So today, as you've been told, I'm going to talk to you about climate and the ecological crisis. But first, I'm going to share with you a proud mother moment. So I have two boys, aged 13 and 10, and it was one of those mornings I was just trying to get my kids into the car and get them to school on time. I'm sure some of you can relate. I was panicking about the traffic. My youngest was dawdling. My eldest was badgering me. But eventually we got into the car. I sit down in the driver's seat. I'm still trying to finish my cup of tea, but my eldest is still nagging. So I turned around to him and I just said, with a little bit of frustration in my voice, "What do you want?" And he just roared, "Climate action!" I was amazed. So I just kind of went along with it and I said, "When do you want it?" And both kids said, "No." So I was really proud of my son because he'd kind of cut through all the stress with his quirky sense of humor, and also of myself because I had indoctrinated my kids at such an early age. But to be honest, it was kind of bittersweet because it brought me back to 5 years previous. So I used to bring my kids, kind of drag my kids to the local climate protests, the Fridays for Future ones. But both my kids are neurodiverse, so both of them are sensitive to noise and crowds, but I just used to bring them anyway. And I remember one particular time, somebody handed me the megaphone and said, "Can you lead the chance?" So I said, fine. I started trying to lead the chance and trying to parent two dysregulated kids at the same time. And I just remember thinking, this has to stop. So I haven't brought them to a climate protest since. I didn't realize it at that time, but I was heading towards burnout. Like, I was constantly thinking of the planet, other people, but I wasn't really listening to the feedback signals my body was giving me and my kids were giving me. So yeah, I was well on my way and I was totally oblivious. Am I saying that climate protests are a bad thing? Absolutely not. We definitely do need to take to the streets, and we need to force our politicians, if we can, to take faster and fair climate action. But we also need to be discerning. There's lots of types of action that we can take, and we need to match the actions we choose to take with our energy, our resources at any given time in our lives. So we also have to ask deeper questions, because a lot of what we've been doing over the decades isn't working as well as we'd like it to. So I personally got involved in these issues back in the 1980s. As a school kid, I was told about global warming, joined the Green Group. And since then, we've had around 28 annual global climate meetings. Several treaties have been signed, but actually emissions have doubled. And our planet is on life support. 6 of the planetary boundaries have been crossed. So you have to ask yourselves, what's going on? But the good thing is in my environmental and education work, I meet probably hundreds of people who are so well-intentioned. But sometimes it can feel like we're kind of swimming against the tide in terms of, creating change and lowering our own impact. I remember setting up the Zero Waste Ireland Facebook group a few years ago. Amazing, so many amazing people. Some people had managed to reduce their waste to 1 small jar a year, which is amazing. And I remember thinking, no, I'm not there yet. I'm not living a perfect zero waste life, and feeling a little bit guilty. But then I just realized, actually, I've got 2 kids with additional needs, and my domestic life is fairly chaotic, so I just have to let go of that. So I think that's a big lesson in terms of coming from activism from a place of guilt and shame about what we can do and what we should be doing. I also remember that, or realized that actually, when I was growing up, my mom in the 70s and 80s, she was raising 4 kids. She was a stay-at-home mom. And she was actually managing to live pretty much a relatively sustainable life before sustainability was even a thing. Like, everyone in those days repaired. My mom grew vegetables. We used to walk everywhere. We didn't fly. But what has happened since then since sustainability has become a conversation, is that through affluence and globalization and fast-paced lives, sustainability has been designed out of the system, yet we are told as 21st century citizens to live 20th century lives. So it's actually quite overwhelming at times, even though we do have a vast array of potential actions we can take from. So the real problem is not lack of intention and goodwill. It's that the authorities pay lip service to sustainability, but their real preoccupation is economic growth. Our globalized economy means that we have to turn nature into stuff and sell it quickly, more and more every year. So we don't really get any status in our society from having a wardrobe of secondhand clothes and reducing our carbon footprint. Status is still the SUV, the luxury holidays, the nice big house. And actually, when you think about it, the idea that we can grow our economy every year, which means extracting more and more stuff, how can this be compatible with living within planetary boundaries? It's literally like the government saying to everyone in the country, here, have a free racing car, but you are morally obliged to drive at less than 50 kilometers an hour. So it doesn't make sense. So how do we kind of get our heads around this contradiction? I think it's that we're told constantly that this, where we are with this hyper-individualized consumer culture, we've reached the top. This is it. This is where we should be: progress, development, achievement. And actually, Ireland is doing well in that regard. I recently read that we are the third richest country, according to Forbes, this year. So what does that mean? Do we wake up every day with a sense of peace, security, abundance, gratitude? I'm one of the richest citizens in the world. No. As we all know, many people wake up not knowing where their rent is going to come from, not being able to afford clean, or not clean, but healthy food. So a lot of the basics are missing. And then there's also the manufactured sense of lack that we have. So we often think, oh, I'll be better when I am earning more, or I'm doing more, I'm producing more, I'm a better person, then I'll be okay. So there's a lot of a sense of lack, whether manufactured or real. So at the same time, we are in Ireland using up a lot more of the natural resources that we should be. So if everybody on the planet used resources like we do in Ireland, we would need over 3 planets. This means that every year, 2/3 of what we use up is stolen from other people around the world, in the global south especially, and from future generations. So, and much of it is wasted. It doesn't improve our quality of life. So could we live meaningful, healthy, satisfied lives with less stuff? Yes, we could, of course we could. And even amongst people who are environmentalists, they thought, oh, we couldn't go backwards. It'd be like going to a barbaric Stone Age existence, but this is not true. And also, I think we're told that our Western civilization is the pinnacle of human achievement, and everybody aspires to it, but this isn't true either. So a few years ago, I spent time with an indigenous leader, Juan, from Colombia. He is a member of the Conquamo ethnic group. They're an indigenous group that live in the Colombian coast, the Caribbean coast. This group, unfortunately, when the Spanish arrived, they lost a lot of their customs, their traditions, their rituals. But the amazing thing is that they are actively choosing to relearn the old ways. They're going back to learn their language and their traditions. They have been inspired by their neighbors, the Kogi. So the Kogi are an amazing tribe. When the Spanish arrived 500 years ago, they fled higher and higher up the mountains of the Sierra Nevada. And they, far from wanting to have our lifestyles, they wanted to get as far away as possible. They see us, the Westerners, as the younger brother, the ones who are destroying the planet. And they see themselves as the guardians of the earth. And they're desperately wanting us to listen to them, to their message, to stop doing what we're doing. And the only thing they can do is really dig deep in terms of their own ritual connection to what they call Aluna. So Aluna is the cosmic consciousness of nature, the source of all life. But the thing is, we're not listening because we think we already have all the answers, right? Of course we do. So we think green growth is the answer. But green growth is like a have your cake and eat it sustainability light model, and is actually perpetuating harm to both people, usually in other countries, but arguably also to ourselves and obviously the planet as well. So when he went back to Colombia, Juan had funding to bulletproof his office because so many of the people in his region have been murdered, the ones who are trying to defend the earth against companies who want to take the natural resources. And the same thing is happening in the Congo, as you know, with the minerals and indigenous people being targeted. But why are these indigenous people all over the world willing to put their lives on the line to protect Mother Earth? Well, for them, the Earth, the planet, it's not just a big lump of rock. It's a living being to which they belong. So where we might see natural capital, they see kin. And where we might see iron ore, they would see an organ. So what we are doing, taking out the natural resources, it's like for them it would be cutting off the limbs and taking out the organs of a live being. So is it just indigenous people who think like this? Well, actually, in the 1970s, the Gaia theory was put forward, which echoes this and says that the Earth and everything on it lives in a kind of a balance, that even the inanimate parts of the Earth and the life, they somehow regulate themselves to create conditions for life. But this is no longer the case. The Earth can no longer regulate itself because of our human activities. Everything is out of balance. We can see this with hurricanes, floods, storms, epidemics, pandemics. And actually, if we look inwards at ourselves, like what was discussed earlier, we are also en masse quite dysregulated. We suffer from chronic stress, from nature deficit disorder, increased conflict, polarization. We're in a bit of a mess, basically. So as we extract from the planet, essentially we're extracting from ourselves. As the planet burns up, we are burning out. So human beings are like a microcosm or a fractal of the bigger whole, and everything is interconnected. So a few years ago, around the time of the COVID lockdowns, I realized that I had reached that state of burnout. And it was actually good timing because it was lockdown, so I ended up realizing that I wasn't listening to my body, as we collectively do not listen to the earth. So I decided to look into forest bathing, and I spent hours and hours in the forest. My nervous system relaxed, and then I could really pause and think, okay, what am I going to do next? So nowadays I work much more in the area of regenerative well-being, helping people overcome eco-anxiety, and find nurturing ways to become better ancestors. And the good news is that I'm not the only one. There's a whole regenerative movement out there, people working regeneratively with the land, looking at organizational changes, systems thinking, looking at trauma, resilience, natural solutions to climate change, etc. So in terms of you and what you can do, because this is all about promoting activism, I would say this is not a call to action, but a call to contemplation, because we can't find the answers by doing the same things again and again. Okay, so when you think, okay, what am I going to do to help save the planet? I would invite you simply to take a deep breath. And pause and think, well, how am I going to connect first? how am I going to meet my intrinsic needs so I can actually depart from a more solid, grounded place and take actions that support myself and everyone around me and the planet. So I suppose lastly, because I'm probably running out of time, I think the most important thing to do is to go beyond, so not to abandon the idea of micro-consumer swaps. So I'm not saying these things are not important, right? But we need to go beyond these conversations about micro-consumerist swaps and net carbon or zero carbon. And we need to kind of expand the conversation to really think about what it means to be a human on the planet today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.